Welcome to another Sad Boys book review. My name is Dusty, and I read Rage by Stephen King, going under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. This is an interesting book because if anybody knows the history of Rage, this was the first book released under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. Because at the time, Stephen King, as I understand the story correctly, his publishers weren't really thrilled about releasing so many of his books at a time and flooding the market. So he decided to go under the pseudonym Richard Bachman so that he could release his books as he wanted. And he also wanted to do an experiment to see how his books would do, kind of more in a vacuum, not under the guise of his, at the time, now growing fame, Stephen King. So Rage is the first book that he released under the Richard Bachman moniker. And also, as he puts it, one of the first books he wrote, period. He wrote it before Carrie, but it released, I want to say it released in 1979. I could be getting my dates a little mixed up here. It could have been 77. Let me look that up real quick. 1977. Okay. So yeah, it was originally published in 1977 under the name Richard Bachman, and this book is no longer in print. I want to say it was somewhere around 1991. I could be wrong on this as well, but there was a school shooting, and Stephen King thought that this book was more likely to continue to propagate and encourage children that need mental help to commit more mass shootings. So he told his publisher to drop the book, and it has been out of publication for about 30 years now. So the way that I was able to read this book is I was very, very fortunate to find in my local library. Support your local library. It's a phenomenal place. They had a copy of the Bachman books, which released in, I want to say 1984 or 1985, and it contains the first four books written under the moniker Richard Bachman. It was Rage, The Long Walk, Road Work, and The Running Man. And so I was able to finally read Rage. It's a book I was interested in because, one, it's a Stephen King book, and two, because it's about a school shooting and it's no longer in print. So it's one of those things where it's like you're interested in it because you no longer have access to it. And so, yeah, I read it. I read it in one sitting. It was a relatively quick read. And, yeah, it was not at all what I was expecting. Do I agree with Stephen King's decision to remove this book from publication? Yeah, I think I can safely say that he did not make a bad call, because it's better to be safe than sorry. And if there were, if I read correctly, and there were a number of school shootings that the shooter attributed this book as the motivation to commit these deeds, then yeah, I think Stephen King was definitely in the right to remove this book from publication. However, despite that, it's still available to people who search for it hard enough if they're really curious to read it. And yeah, it's just kind of an interesting one for me because I'm very glad I read it, but like I said, it's not at all what I was expecting, knowing that it was about a school shooting. So what I didn't expect was a book about the kind of deeper traumas and trials that come from being a teenager. Because a lot of this book is about, so the main character, Charlie, he is our aforementioned school shooter, and he murders his teacher and holds his class hostage throughout the school day. And while I was expecting, given Stephen King's style and how dark he can go at times, I was expecting this book to be a bloodbath, and in actuality it was not. It was, like I said, more about the psychological side of the situation, and a lot of it was about the different students in his class that he is holding hostage. And I really enjoyed the in-depth character moments that King went into with this book, with not only just Charlie, but his classmates. And it was a really just interesting look at how all of these different teenagers handle the different traumas that their life has faced at this point in time, and the kind of discovery that they all go through together as they learn these things about themselves and each other. So, yeah, I don't think Charlie is a character that you should look up to or inspire to be, because he is a murderer. But I definitely do think that he has at least some forms of sympathy drawn to him, not enough to hand wave the murder that he commits. Charlie, he did a terrible, terrible thing in this book, and he definitely deserves to suffer the consequences of his actions. But that doesn't mean we can't look at the situations of his life that brought him to this moment and not feel a little sympathy for him because of it. Obviously, he should have sought help in a more healthy manner, and I think that the quote unquote help that the school system provided for him was woefully inept and unable to actually give him the help that he needed, hence why he took the drastic measures that he took. But it is one of those things to where I feel like if Charlie did get the correct and appropriate help that he needed, this situation would have been averted. So I definitely do feel a bit of sympathy for Charlie because of that. And like I said, this is by no means an endorsement of his actions. This is a condemnation of his actions, because murder is never the answer, especially of innocent people. And holding his classroom hostage like he did is also just a terrible deed. So I'm condemning Charlie's actions, but finding sympathy in the life that pushed him to that point. So yeah, and I really, really love the deep dive that his classmates get. Um, it definitely takes some weird turns at times, but one of my favorite things about Stephen King is his character writing. I don't know if that's a common opinion or if that's a more of a hot take. I know his endings are very, very divisive amongst people for a lot of his books, but I really do love Stephen King's character writing, and I do think this is one of those books that does showcase it in a very meaningful way. So really enjoy the character writing. Yeah, like I said, this is a relatively short book, so there's not really much I can say without going into the plot itself, which I won't do. But I definitely, it's kind of a hard book to recommend, because I definitely recommend it if you are interested in Stephen King's work and you want to experience some of his earlier writing and see something that's a little more controversial, even for Stephen King standards. I do recommend it if you want to see what I consider to be an interesting character study of a broken teenager and the depths that led to the heinous and unforgivable acts that he committed, or if you just want to see an interesting take at some of these interesting psyches of teenage students. It's been a long time since I was a teenager, so it's hard for me to really say if I don't think this is, I didn't really connect with any of the characters in a yeah, when I was a teenager, this was how I felt as well, because I feel like I had a relatively normal, at least school life. My school life as a teenager was relatively normal, school romances, stupid high school drama that doesn't mean anything, and, just normal school things. So I can't say I was, able to really engage with a lot of these characters on a more deeper personal level outside of just outsider looking in. But I do think he did a good job conveying these teenagers and the traumas that they deal with. So I would recommend it if you're into something like that. But that being said, it is the general premise of the book is a particularly heavier subject, even if I don't think the meat of the book itself is focusing on that heavy subject. So do keep that in mind. The ending I thought was just absolutely wild. Without going into it, it definitely felt like I didn't expect it to go this way. There were a lot of ways I expected this book to go, and it didn't go into any of them. And I think that's a good thing. That lack of predictability was a positive. But yeah, the ending definitely got a little wild at times, and I just kind of like stood back and laughed at it because I was like, this is kind of crazy, don't you think? But yeah, I'm glad I read this. I'm glad I had the opportunity to read it. Definitely not my favorite Stephen King book, but definitely worth a read. Like I said, if you're interested in Stephen King's bibliography and something that has this kind of heavy subject matter. So with that, I'm giving Rage a 7 out of 10. And yeah, check your local library to see if they have a copy of the Bachman books. If not, you can try to find it on eBay for a pretty steep price. I think the paperbacks can be somewhere around 60, but you're looking at $100 or more for a hardcover edition. But yeah, this has been another Sad Boys book review. Thank you everybody for listening, and take care.